I was 34 when I finally stopped answering my dad's calls. My name's Caleb, and for most of my adult life, I'd been the reliable one, the dependable son, the fixer, the guy who somehow got roped into every family emergency, financial or otherwise. I didn't even realize how deep I was in until I stepped back and looked at the past decade of my life, what I'd spent, what I'd sacrificed, and what I'd silently swallowed just to keep peace with a family that never really saw me. I work in IT, freelance stuff, mostly, and for the last several years, I'd been doing well enough. Not rich, but comfortable. I had my own place, a paid-off car, no debt, and a decent emergency fund. I wasn't flashy about it, though. I didn't take vacations, didn't post my life online, didn't talk about work at family dinners. I was just the guy who showed up when someone needed help moving, or when their Wi-Fi stopped working, or when mom's medication hit $400 and they forgot to budget for it again. That was me. Caleb the fallback. Caleb the we knew you'd come through kid. And then there's my younger sister, Brielle. If you met Brielle first, you'd think she was charming. Funny, bubbly, Instagram perfect. She's 31 and has been between jobs for the better part of 8 years, unless you count her short-lived Etsy candle shop that somehow involved me building her website and handling all her customer refunds. She still lives in the house we grew up in, rent-free, with my parents. Drives a car they bought her. Posts daily pictures with captions like hustle and grind while sipping iced lattes dad pays for. And yet, at every family gathering, the conversation always seems to orbit around her. Her dreams, her plans, her latest creative venture. I stopped expecting fairness from my parents a long time ago, but I never expected what happened last summer. It started with an offhand comment. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off a prescription that mom had run out of early. Another last-minute, "Can you help us out?" request. I handed the bag over, ready to head out, when Dad asked me to take a look at his laptop. Some update wasn't installing, nothing major, but I figured I'd do it quick and go. As I was waiting for it to reboot, Mom and Brielle were chatting in the next room, thinking I couldn't hear them. "She won't have to worry about money once we're gone," Mom was saying, her voice low but clear. "The house, the savings, it'll all go to her. It's only right. Caleb doesn't need it." I froze. I didn't even register the rest of the conversation, just that line, playing on a loop in my head. It's only right. I sat there, stunned, while the update finished and the screen flickered back to life. I must have moved like a robot because I don't remember saying goodbye. I drove home in silence, heart thudding. I wasn't upset about the money, exactly. It wasn't greed. It was something deeper, like every quiet hurt and overlooked moment had finally snapped into place. All those years of being the helper, the dependable one, the wallet they could always tap, and now I was just written out of the story. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept going over it in my head, trying to convince myself maybe I misheard. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. But by morning, I knew. It wasn't a mistake. It was confirmation. I was the backup plan, the financial safety net, the one who didn't need anything because I'd never asked for anything. And that made me invisible. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. I didn't call them out or confront anyone. I just went quiet. The next time Mom asked me to help fix the washer, I said I was busy. When Brielle texted me about setting up her pop-up store for her latest hobby, painted seashell jewelry, I kid you not, I left her on read. And when Dad called because their internet was down and Brielle has an online meeting, I didn't even bother listening to the voicemail. A week passed. Then two. I wasn't trying to be petty. I just stopped offering myself up. It was the first time in years that I drew a line. I figured maybe they'd notice. Maybe they'd ask what was wrong. But instead, all I got was silence. Until the text. "Insurance is due." That was it. No, "Hey Caleb." No, "Hope you're well." Just a demand, like I was their personal accountant. I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. I could have ignored it. Could have typed out a long explanation, unloaded everything I'd held in for years. But instead, I kept it simple. 2 words, ask her. That was the beginning, the shift, the moment I chose myself. What I didn't know then was just how far things would spiral, and how fast. Because when you remove the crutch people have been leaning on for years, they don't try to stand up. They panic. They lash out. And in my family, that panic took a very specific, very ugly form. It started with a phone call from my aunt, and it ended with a family dinner I'll never forget. I didn't answer Aunt Lorna's call that first time. I watched it ring out on my screen while I sat on the couch, sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending to scroll through my email. But when she called again an hour later, then left a voicemail, I figured I should at least hear what she had to say. Lorna's never been the meddling type. She's my mom's older sister, blunt and sharp as glass, but fair. She's also the only person in our family who ever saw through Brielle's sweetheart act. Her voicemail was short. "Caleb, call me back. Something's off. Your dad's been running his mouth. It's about the money." I remember sitting up straight like I'd been jolted. I called her back immediately. "Hey," she answered on the first ring. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "What's going on?" She didn't waste time. "I was over at your parents' yesterday dropping off that space heater your mom asked for. She said Brielle's room gets drafty. Anyway, I get there and your dad's in the garage with Steve and Ernie, drinking beers and talking crap like it's poker night in '92. I knew where this was going. My stomach tightened. He starts going on about how ungrateful kids are these days. Says you've turned your back on the family and that you don't lift a finger to help out anymore. I clenched my jaw. Of course he did. Then, she continued, her tone shifting. He says something that made me want to throw the heater at him. He says, "Good thing we made the right choice with Brielle. At least we'll have one kid who takes care of us when we're gone." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "You okay?" she asked gently. I swallowed hard. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," she snapped. "Caleb, you've been bending over backwards for them for how long now? 10 years. And this is how they talk about you the second you stop funding their lifestyle." That was the word. Funding. Like I was a bank account with a name. I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Like I'd been slapped in a room full of people and no one stepped in. That weekend, I drove out to the mountains. Just for the day. I needed the space, the silence. I hiked a trail I used to walk when I was younger, before life got complicated, before I was the responsible one. I sat at the overlook and just thought about everything. The holidays I spent alone because Brielle needed extra attention during her breakups. The bills I covered when mom's co-payments got too high. The laptop I bought dad 2 Christmases ago, the same one I'd fixed when I overheard the conversation that started all of this. I thought about the time I loaned Brielle $2,000 when she claimed she'd finally landed a job at some marketing startup that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. She never paid me back. I never asked. I thought it'd ruin the peace. But peace, I realized, had always come at my expense. Things escalated quickly after that. First came the group text. It was a long paragraph from Mom, sent to me, Dad, Brielle, and my Aunt Marie, who never replies to anything anyway. It read like a forced essay. "Family is about support and love, not money. We understand Caleb needs space, but we're a unit, and we've always had each other's backs. We shouldn't have to remind anyone of the sacrifices we've made as parents." That's all I'll say. That last line, the passive-aggressive cherry on top, had me pacing my living room. Sacrifices they made. I didn't respond, but Brielle did. "Thanks, Mom. Some of us understand what family actually means, Red Heart." I almost laughed. Almost. The next week, Dad sent another text. Just 3 words this time. "Need grocery money." No punctuation. No please. I replied with 4. "Ask your chosen one." 10 minutes later, Brielle called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then again. I finally picked up on the 4th ring. "What the hell is your problem?" she snapped, skipping any greeting. "You're being selfish and childish, and honestly, it's embarrassing." I didn't raise my voice. I was too tired for that. Embarrassing for who? For Mom and Dad. For the rest of us. You think you're proving some kind of point? All you're doing is abandoning the people who raised you. I let out a slow breath. The same people who left everything to you behind my back. Silence. Then a scoff. "Oh my God," she said. "You heard that? You're seriously acting like it matters." "It matters," I said. "It matters that I spent years supporting them, and they decided I didn't need to be part of their future." "You don't," she exploded. "You're fine. You have a job and a condo and a car. I'm still getting on my feet. You've been getting on your feet for 8 years. Click. She hung up. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Actual paper. From my mom. Inside was a card with a picture of a watercolor lake, and the words, "Family means everything," printed on the front. She'd written inside, "I wish you'd remember what your grandmother always said. No matter how far you go, blood is blood. You can't just walk away. We love you. Please think about what you're doing to us." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just guilt, wrapped in pastel ink. It would have been comical if it hadn't hurt so much. But the real breaking point didn't come until the night of the surprise dinner. I got a call from Aunt Lorna again. "They're having a dinner Sunday night," she said. "Claim it's just for close family. But your name came up. They said you'll probably be too busy to show. That it's just as well." That stung more than I expected. I didn't RSVP. I didn't say anything. But that Sunday, around 6, I drove over anyway. I didn't go in. I parked across the street, lights off, engine running, just to see. The driveway was full, my cousin Nate's Jeep, Brielle's white Civic, even Aunt Marie's minivan. I watched through the window as everyone gathered around the dining table. My seat, the one I always took at family dinners, was filled. Brielle sat there, laughing like she owned the room. My parents looked relaxed, content. I wasn't even a thought. And yet, I knew something they didn't. Because earlier that week, I'd had a conversation of my own, one I hadn't told anyone about, with their lawyer. See, what my parents didn't know was that when I helped them refinance their house 5 years ago, yes, that too, I became a co-signer on certain documents. For tax purposes. For convenience. I was the one who made the phone calls, who filled out the forms. My name had stayed on some of those papers, and that included certain rights they never bothered to read. I didn't do anything. Not yet. But sitting in that car, watching them toast over a table I used to set for them, I realized something had shifted in me. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. They chose her. They made that choice long ago. And I had finally made mine. The real twist? That dinner wasn't just for fun. It was an announcement. And I only found out what they were planning because Brielle, in her infinite arrogance, decided to post a picture, her grinning between mom and dad, captioned, "So excited to step into the next chapter. Can't wait to share soon." I stared at the post. Then I clicked save, because I knew what it meant. And I had a feeling that what they were about to share would require a response, one they wouldn't see coming. I didn't sleep much the night of that dinner. There was something about seeing that post, Brielle beaming with her arms slung around both of our parents, like she'd already inherited the throne, that cracked something in me I hadn't realized was fragile. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. That was the strange part. I just felt hollow, like I'd been mourning a version of my family that never really existed. I kept telling myself I should be used to it by now. The favoritism, the disregard, the quiet expectation that I'd always be there in the background cleaning up everyone's mess. But something about that photo, that stupid caption, "So excited to step into the next chapter," made it all feel final. Like a door had shut behind me, and I hadn't even noticed the click. And for the first time in years, I didn't want to open it again. That next week, I turned inward. I stopped checking their texts, stopped scrolling past Brielle's curated feed of candles, crystals, and brunch. I deactivated Facebook altogether. I knew if I kept looking, I'd keep hurting, and frankly, I was tired of bleeding for people who didn't even notice I was wounded. It wasn't some dramatic purge. I didn't throw my phone in a lake or announce anything to the world. I just disconnected. Quietly. Completely. But isolation has a funny way of echoing. At first, it was peaceful. Then it got loud. Without the constant noise of family chaos, I was left alone with my own thoughts. And it hit me harder than I expected. How much of my identity had been built around being useful to people who saw me as convenient rather than cared for. I realized I hadn't built a life for myself so much as I'd constructed one around others. And now, with that scaffolding gone, I was left with a strange, hollow shell. The first week was bad. I went to work, but barely spoke to clients beyond the necessities. I ignored calls from friends, turned down invites, left groceries in the bag overnight more than once. My place got messy. I got messy. There was this one night I'll never forget. It was raining, the kind that comes down sideways, hammering your windows like it's trying to find a way in. I was sitting on the floor of my living room, back against the couch, laptop closed, phone face down. I just remembered Mom's birthday was that day. I hadn't called. Not even a text. The guilt sat heavy in my chest, familiar and cloying. Then I remembered something from years ago, her 60th birthday party. The one I planned. I rented the restaurant, paid the deposit, coordinated with the bakery, even picked up her favorite kind of white roses. And that night, after it was over, Brielle got all the credit. Brielle picked out such a cute theme. Mom gushed to her friends. I remember standing next to the cake, holding a stack of dirty dishes, listening to that. I remember saying nothing. That night, Sitting in the dark while the rain roared outside, I whispered out loud, "You don't owe them anything." And I meant it. The next morning, I started to rebuild. I didn't do anything drastic. I didn't book a solo trip to Iceland or start journaling on a cliffside at dawn. I just started taking my own life seriously, one piece at a time. I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom. Not just a surface wipe down, but a full purge. Old receipts, dead batteries, mismatched socks, fading photos I didn't want to look at anymore. I boxed it all up and drove it to the dump. Then I stood there in the parking lot, watching that box disappear into the trash chute, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled fully. That night, I reopened my laptop and looked at the list I'd written years ago, projects I'd start if I ever had time. I'd made it in 2020, during lockdown. Most of it was pipe dreams. A couple were business ideas. One of them caught my eye, a tech support subscription service for older adults, especially people who didn't grow up with computers. I'd called it Kind Line in the doc. I smiled just a little. The next day, I bought the domain. It started small. I reached out to two of my old clients, both seniors I'd helped with basic tech stuff before, and asked if they'd be interested in monthly check-ins, device help, scam alerts, all that. They both said yes immediately. So I set up a scheduling system, drafted a welcome packet, and started reaching out to more. Within a month, I had 10 clients. Within 2, I had 30. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. But it was mine. Mine in a way nothing I'd ever done for my family had been. And it felt good. I used to hate marketing, but now I was posting on LinkedIn, reaching out to local community centers, offering free workshops on how not to get scammed online. I even made a flyer, printed 100 copies, and dropped them off at libraries, doctors' offices, and senior homes. Word spread faster than I expected. People appreciated the patience, the lack of jargon. They trusted me. I hadn't felt this confident in years. By spring, I'd officially filed the business as an LLC, hired a part-time assistant, outsourced the website refresh to a design student I met at a workshop. She was eager, smart, and kept insisting on calling me Mr. Caleb, which made me feel about 60, but I didn't correct her. Somewhere along the way, my apartment started feeling more like home. I bought new curtains, framed some art, even installed a little herb garden on the windowsill. I hosted 2 friends for dinner, friends I'd been dodging during my slump, and they both commented on how different I seemed. Lighter, one of them said, like you're finally breathing. And I was. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten. The wound was still there, just scabbed over. And every so often, it would flare. Like the day I found out what Brielle's big announcement actually was. I hadn't been following her on social media, but one of my clients, sweet woman named Dolores, brought it up during a tech call. "You said your sister's name was Brielle, right?" she asked, peering over her glasses. "Is that the one doing that lifestyle show online?" I blinked. "What?" "She's got this little web series. Rooted Radiance, or something like that." It popped up in my YouTube feed. All candles and self-care and stories about healing your inner child. Sounded familiar. I searched it after we wrapped. And sure enough, there she was. Rooted Radiance with Brielle. Episode 1. Breaking Generational Trauma, even if it means cutting off toxic people. I watched exactly 3 minutes. Just enough to hear her say, in a soft, breathy voice, "Sometimes, choosing yourself means walking away from people who expect too much and give too little." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe it. She was telling my story, but flipped. She'd cast herself as the wounded heroine, the one who'd bravely distanced herself from a brother who demanded too much, who didn't respect her boundaries, who, get this, weaponized money to control family dynamics. I should have been furious. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it, Evidence, not out of spite, but because I had a feeling I'd need it someday. And that day wasn't far off. Because a month later, I got a call from the lawyer. Not mine. Theirs. "Hi Caleb, this is Mark Pfeiffer. I'm calling on behalf of your parents, James and Denise." He was polite, cautious, said he'd been reviewing their estate documents, and there were some things that needed clarification regarding past ownership agreements and financial contributions. He asked if I had time to come in for a meeting. I agreed, calmly, even though my pulse was racing, because I knew what they were trying to do. They were rewriting the past, and they had no idea I'd already started writing my own version of the future. When I stepped into Mark Pfeiffer's office, it felt like walking into a negotiation I hadn't asked for, but one I'd been preparing for my entire life without realizing it. His office was all polished wood, tastefully neutral art, and leather chairs stiff enough to remind you this wasn't meant to be comfortable. He offered me water, which I declined, and gestured to the seat across from his desk. I took it, placing the slim black folder I'd brought with me, my own collection of documents, quietly on my lap. He folded his hands. "Thanks for coming, Caleb. I know it's a bit out of the blue." I nodded once. "You said there were estate concerns?" He gave a careful smile. One of those lawyer smiles that's supposed to put you at ease, but mostly makes you want to check your wallet. "Your parents are updating some elements of their estate plan. They recently revised their will, and during that process, a few details from prior years came up. Things we wanted to clarify before finalizing everything." I didn't respond right away. I wanted him to speak first. Lawyers like to fill silences. It's a professional hazard. Sure enough, he continued. "Specifically, there are a few financial transactions from roughly 5 years ago when the mortgage was refinanced. At that time, I understand you were a co-signer." "Correct," I said. "And it appears that in that arrangement, you were briefly granted what we'd call contingent interest in the property. It was temporary, of course, but the title records from that year list you as a co-owner." "That's right," I said again, opening my folder now, laying down a copy of the relevant title document on his desk. "My name is still on file with the county. It was never removed." Mark hesitated. That threw him off balance. He picked up the page, glanced over it, and nodded slowly. "Yes, this is what we found in our search. We were just hoping to formalize its release. Your parents assumed it was taken care of." "It wasn't," I said calmly. "And I never signed anything relinquishing that interest. If they want to transfer full ownership elsewhere, say, to my sister, for instance, I'd need to sign off." He gave another lawyer smile, this one more strained. "Of course, this is purely a formality." I leaned back in my chair. "Sure, but if it's just a formality, I assume there's no rush." He paused again, then carefully said, "They were hoping to resolve it before the house is formally transferred." There it was. The real reason. The dinner. The caption. The new chapter. They were handing the house over to Brielle. It was symbolic, but also strategic. The house was fully paid off now, thanks in no small part to my years of silent contributions during the refinancing period. Transferring it now would reduce future probate complications, make it easier for Brielle to hold on to it. And I was the last loose thread, a thread they didn't think could pull the whole thing apart. I smiled for the first time. "Well, if they want my signature, I'll need a few things too." Mark blinked, such as backdated reimbursement for the closing costs I covered on the refinance, plus the property tax I paid for 2 years afterward. "I have the receipts." I placed a second sheet on his desk, then a third. "And while we're at it, any documents in which my parents certified I was a financial co-contributor to the property, I'd like those included in the estate file, just to be safe." He looked mildly panicked now. "That might complicate the current estate draft. Then they'll have to decide if it's worth the house," I said, standing. "Thanks for the water offer." I left him staring at the papers. On the drive home, I turned the music up louder than usual. Not angry music. Not sad. Something with drums and motion. Something that made me feel like the ground beneath me was finally mine. That was the day I stopped reacting and started planning. The first step was quiet. I contacted a friend of mine, Becca, who worked in real estate law. We'd known each other since college, and while we weren't close anymore, we still sent each other the occasional happy birthday or "did you see this meme?" text. I told her I needed advice. She told me she owed me a favor anyway for helping her parents with their smart TV setup over FaceTime. We met at a coffee shop near her office. I laid it all out. The title, the tax records, the refinance receipts. She scanned everything with a slow, impressed whistle. "You've basically got a paper trail that shows you own a third of that house," she said. "Only a third?" "Well, technically, if your name was on the deed during the refinancing and you contributed to costs directly linked to maintaining the asset, yeah, you have a strong case for partial equity, especially if there's nothing signed that says otherwise." I sipped my coffee. "Good to know." She glanced at me. "You're not going to force a sale or anything, are you?" I shook my head. "No, I don't want the house." "Then what do you want?" I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't entirely sure. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about the principle, about the fact that I'd been treated like an ATM for years, only to be cut out of everything the second I stopped pouring myself dry. And now they wanted me quiet, obedient, cooperative. I was done with that. I want them to realize I'm not disposable, I finally said. Becca nodded. Then don't be. Next step was gathering allies. It started with Aunt Lorna. I invited her to lunch, not at our usual diner, but at a small bistro downtown where I knew we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I told her everything. The title, the call from the lawyer, Brielle's web show. She didn't say much until the very end. Then she leaned forward, stared at me hard, and said, "You have every right to do what you're doing. But don't just play defense. Make a move." What kind of move? She smiled. The kind that reminds them who kept that roof over their heads while their favorite played entrepreneur on Instagram. A week later, I filed a notice of interest with the county clerk's office. It was a quiet legal move, just a formal statement of my financial claim on the property. Nothing dramatic. No lawsuit. No eviction threat. Just a quiet little flag on the house's record that meant no one could sell, refinance, or transfer it without resolving my share first. I knew my parents would find out eventually. I didn't expect it to be so soon. 3 days later, Mom showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the last time I delivered one of her prescriptions and overheard her planning my exclusion from the will. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just smaller, like someone who'd been protected by illusions and was now standing in real light. "Caleb," she said, like it was a question and an accusation all at once. I opened the door wider but didn't step aside. "I'm not here to argue," she said quickly. "I just want to understand why you're making things so complicated." I almost laughed. "You think this is complicated? You could have just talked to us," she said. "I did," I replied. "You just didn't listen." She blinked, taken aback. "We gave Brielle the house because she needs stability," she said. "You're doing fine. You don't even know what I'm doing," I said. "You never ask. You just assume." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "You've always been the strong one." "No," I said. "I've just always been the quiet one." "That's not the same thing." She didn't respond. I didn't let her in. I told her to speak to her lawyer. Then I closed the door. That night, I printed the latest client invoice report for Kindline. 64 active clients. 2 part-time assistants. A community partnership with a local senior center. I slipped the report into my folder. Right next to the title documents. The property tax receipts. The screenshots of Brielle's show. Because this wasn't revenge out of rage. It was chess. And I had just moved my queen. Let me start by saying this. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's a slow, meticulous burn, silent, measured, almost graceful in its unfolding. Mine wasn't loud. It didn't involve public confrontation or screaming matches across a dinner table. No, my revenge played out in quiet signatures, polite phone calls, and the slow unraveling of a false narrative. It was patient, surgical, and it worked. After Mom's unexpected visit, things went quiet. I thought maybe they were regrouping. Maybe Brielle was filming another episode of Rooted Radiance, where she'd tearfully tell her viewers about toxic masculinity in the family, or how some people only give love with strings attached. But for 3 weeks, I heard nothing. Not a call, not a text, not a passive-aggressive meme posted to my feed. Just silence. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Thursday, official-looking envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a formal proposal drafted by Mark Pfeiffer, their lawyer. It outlined terms for releasing my interest in the house. In exchange, they offered a goodwill gesture, a check for $6,000. They framed it as a compromise, a fair settlement for your brief financial involvement in the property. I laughed when I read that. $6,000. $6,000 for 10 years of covering emergencies, groceries, medication, internet, repairs, and refinancing fees? $6,000 for being the safety net they cut loose the moment it was convenient? I didn't even reply. Instead, I called Becca. She reviewed the letter, chuckled under her breath, and said, "You ready to make this formal?" I nodded. We drafted a counteroffer, not through anger, not with threats. Just facts. She attached a full itemized breakdown of my financial contributions to the home over the last decade, complete with supporting receipts and bank statements. The total was closer to $38,000. She also cited state law about equitable interest in jointly titled property. And most importantly, she included my request, not cash, but a lien. That's right, a legally recorded lien on the house. Not to force a sale, not to evict anyone, just to ensure that whenever the house was refinanced, transferred, or sold, whether next year or 10 years from now, I'd get my share. With interest. We mailed it to Mark. Certified, of course. This time, the response came fast. 2 days later, Brielle showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer at first, just watched her through the peephole. She was pacing, her oversized sunglasses sliding down her nose, her phone in her hand like she was about to live stream the confrontation. When I finally opened the door, she didn't wait for me to speak. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. "Do you know how hard I've worked for this?" I raised an eyebrow. "Worked?" She ignored me. "The house is supposed to be mine. I've already invested in renovations. I'm filming content there. I've got deals pending. Brands want to sponsor the kitchen transformation. You can't just come in and slap a lien on it like you're owed something." I leaned against the doorframe. "I am owed something. You're doing this to hurt Mom and Dad." "No. I'm doing this to protect myself. You never cared about the house before. You didn't even want it. And I still don't," I said. "I want what's fair. That's all." She stared at me, breathing hard, like she couldn't believe I wasn't backing down. "You're not the victim here, Caleb." I gave a slow nod. "I'm not. I was the volunteer. But not anymore." She turned and stormed off without another word. That was the last time I saw her in person. The lien changed everything. Suddenly, Brielle couldn't secure her brand deals. Sponsors backed out. She couldn't get the insurance transfer approved, and any future home equity loan was now tied up in a legal encumbrance, one she couldn't bypass. She'd post filtered videos in the kitchen with captions like, "Just manifesting through the noise dizzy," but I could see the cracks. Eventually, one of her followers tagged me in the comments. "You're the brother, right? This whole thing makes so much sense now." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Meanwhile, my parents tried a new tactic. Mark called again, politely informing me that James and Denise were reconsidering the estate structure. He invited me to a meeting, this time with all parties present. I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, because I wanted closure. We met in Mark's office again. My parents sat stiffly on one side of the table, Brielle notably absent. She'd probably realized she was a liability in these situations. Becca came with me this time, not just for legal support, but for balance. I knew I'd be tempted to fall back into old habits, to make excuses for them, to minimize. Having her there kept me focused. The meeting was civil. Mark explained that the will had been adjusted to include me again, modestly, but officially. A portion of the savings. A clause about equitable property division. They'd also agreed to settle the lien now, offering a lump sum payment of $32,000. Still less than I was due, but close enough to signal they were taking it seriously. Then Mom did something I didn't expect. She spoke. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "We thought you didn't need us." I met her eyes. "I didn't. I needed you to respect me." She blinked, and for a second, I saw something real flicker there. Not guilt exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Dad didn't say much. He looked tired, smaller than I remembered. It was strange, seeing him like that, less a figure of control and more just a man. Flawed, aging, uncertain. I signed the paperwork, accepted the settlement, removed the lien. Then I left. The fallout with Brielle was slower. Without the house as her guaranteed studio, her content lost its polish. Her brand partnerships dried up. She posted a teary video about family betrayal that got a lot of sympathy, but no new deals. Eventually, she pivoted to something else, energy coaching, I think. The last time I checked, she was doing Instagram lives from her car. I stopped checking after that. Kindline grew faster than I expected. By the end of the year, I had over 100 active clients and a waiting list. I moved into a small office space downtown, hired Becca part-time as general counsel, and brought on 2 more assistants. I even started a YouTube channel, Basic Tech Tips for Seniors. Nothing flashy, just me, my voice, a clean background, and a steady stream of people thanking me for explaining things in a way that made sense. At Thanksgiving, I hosted my own dinner, invited friends, a few clients. Aunt Lorna brought pies. We laughed, played music, ate until we were too full to move. I didn't think about the old house once. At Christmas, I got a card from my parents. Just a card. No check. No requests. No guilt. Inside was a simple message. We hope you're well. We're proud of what you've built. I didn't cry, but I did sit with that card for a long time. I didn't reply, and I didn't need to, because I had already said everything I needed to say, just not with words. With boundaries. With silence. With the quiet, steady act of choosing myself. For once. Finally. Always.